Let's talk about money, the system we all play, but few truly understand. It's everywhere, shaping our choices, our dreams, and even our sense of security. Yet for most of us, the rules of this game are invisible, quietly guiding our lives from the shadows. But these rules aren't just invisible. They're ancient, woven into the very fabric of our society over centuries. Most of us think it's simple: work hard, get paid, buy things, and try to save a little for the future. It feels straightforward, almost automatic, like a routine we're born into and rarely question. But this routine is the result of centuries of economic evolution, shaped by those who had the most to gain from keeping things predictable and in their favor. The truth is, the game is rigged by rules written centuries ago, rules designed by people who wanted to keep their power and wealth and pass it down through generations. In the 1700s and 1800s, powerful families and early bankers set up systems, like inheritance laws, trusts, and exclusive investment opportunities that made sure their fortunes would outlast them. These weren't just business decisions, they were deliberate moves to create dynasties. Take the Rothschild family, for example. In the 19th century, they built a banking empire that spanned Europe, using carefully crafted trusts and intermarriage to keep their wealth consolidated. Their influence was so great that, as historian Niall Ferguson notes, the Rothschilds were the bankers to kings and governments, shaping the fate of nations. These aren't laws you can vote on or change overnight. They're deep-rooted economic forces that quietly decide who gets rich, who stays comfortable, and who struggles to get by. For example, the concept of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherits everything, kept wealth concentrated in a few hands for centuries, while everyone else had to start from scratch. In England, primogeniture was the law of the land for hundreds of years. It meant that vast estates, like those of the Dukes of Westminster, stayed intact and powerful, generation after generation. Historian David Cantillon points out that this system ensured the continuity of the landed elite, making it almost impossible for outsiders to break in. These rules explain why your savings seem to shrink every year, why financial crises often end up making the rich even richer, and why the gap between the wealthy and everyone else keeps getting wider, no matter how hard you work. Take the 2008 financial crisis. While millions lost their homes and jobs, the wealthiest used their connections and resources to buy up assets at bargain prices, coming out even stronger. Economist Joseph Stiglitz has said, "The rules of the economic game have been set by those at the top, and they have the resources to keep them that way." In 2008, billionaire investor Warren Buffett famously bought shares in struggling companies like Goldman Sachs, profiting handsomely as the market recovered. Meanwhile, ordinary families lost their homes and life savings. We rarely stop to ask who wrote the rulebook or why it was written the way it was. But if you look back, you'll see that every major financial innovation, from central banking to stock markets, was shaped by those already in power. They wrote the rules to protect their interests, often at the expense of everyone else. Tonight, we're opening that rulebook, page by page, to see what's really inside. Consider the creation of the Bank of England in 1694. It wasn't just a public service. It was a way for wealthy merchants and aristocrats to lend money to the government and earn interest, cementing their influence over national policy. Financial historian Liaquat Ahmed explains, central banks were designed to serve the interests of those who already had capital, not the common citizen. Imagine playing Monopoly, but someone else already owns all the hotels and properties. You just circle the board, paying rent, never getting ahead. That's how the real world can feel for most people. In fact, Monopoly was originally designed as a warning about the dangers of concentrated wealth and land ownership. The game's creator, Lizzie Magie, wanted to show how unchecked property ownership leads to inequality and frustration. Her original Landlord's game was meant to teach players about the perils of monopolies, a lesson that's still painfully relevant today. Our money system is governed by three ancient laws: Gresham's law, the Cantillon Effect, and the Pareto Principle. Gresham's law, coined in the 16th century, explains why bad money drives out good, a lesson learned during times when kings would secretly reduce the silver content in coins. The Cantillon Effect from the 18th century shows how those closest to new money, like bankers and governments, benefit first, while everyone else pays the price through inflation. And the Pareto Principle, discovered in the 19th century, reveals that a small percentage of people almost always control the majority of wealth. For example, during the reign of Henry VIII, the English crown repeatedly debased its currency, mixing in cheaper metals to stretch the royal budget. Merchants quickly learned to hoard the good coins and spend the bad ones, a real-world demonstration of Gresham's law. The Cantillon Effect is visible every time a central bank injects new money into the economy. In the early 2020s, when governments printed trillions to fight recession, asset prices soared, benefiting those who owned stocks and real estate, while wages lagged behind. Economist Thomas Piketty notes, the return on capital almost always outpaces the growth of wages, deepening inequality. These aren't just theories, they're living, breathing forces, shaping your financial reality right now, whether you notice them or not. Every time a government prints more money, or a new technology changes how we trade, these old laws come into play, deciding who wins and who loses. In Silicon Valley, for instance, early investors and founders often capture the lion's share of wealth from new tech booms, while latecomers and workers get a much smaller slice. The Pareto Principle, sometimes called the 80-20 rule, shows up everywhere, from venture capital to real estate, concentrating gains in the hands of a few. Once you see how these rules work, you can't unsee them. Suddenly the patterns of wealth and struggle start to make sense. You realize why some families seem to stay rich forever, while others can't seem to get ahead, no matter how hard they try. As financial journalist Rana Foroohar puts it, the system is designed to reward those who already have assets, not those who work for a living. So buckle up, we're pulling back the curtain on the world's most unfair game and revealing the secrets that have kept old money in power for centuries. By understanding the history and mechanics of these ancient rules, you'll see the world and your place in it with new eyes. And as economist Mariana Mazzucato reminds us, if we want a fairer future, we have to understand the past and who wrote the rules we live by. Let's dive into a classic economic principle that has echoed through the centuries. Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good. This isn't just a theory, it's a pattern that has shaped the fate of empires, toppled currencies, and continues to influence our wallets today. But why does this happen? What are the forces at play that make people cling to good money and spend the bad? Imagine you're living in 16th century England. The government issues two types of coins, one made of pure silver, and another that's been clipped or mixed with cheaper metals. Both are stamped with the same value, but only one holds real worth. This scenario isn't unique. Similar stories played out in ancient Greece, Rome, and even in China's dynasties. If you had to spend one, which would you choose? Most people would spend the debased coin, holding on to the pure silver for themselves. It's human nature to keep what's valuable and get rid of what's not. This is the heart of Gresham's law, first articulated by Sir Thomas Gresham in the 16th century, but observed long before. The law states, when coins of different value are in circulation, the overvalued or bad money will drive the undervalued or good money out of circulation. Throughout history, this behavior repeated itself. In ancient Rome, as emperors debased the denarius by mixing in base metals, citizens hoarded the older, purer coins, hiding them away in jars or safes, while the debased coins flooded the market. By the 3rd century AD, the silver content of the denarius had dropped from over 90% to less than 5%. Archaeological finds show hordes of pure coins buried during these times, evidence of people's instinct to protect their wealth. Fast forward to today, and we use fiat currency, paper money and digital dollars that aren't backed by gold or silver, but by trust in governments and central banks. The same principle applies, but on a much larger scale. In the 1920s Weimar Republic, the government printed so much money that prices doubled every few days. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January 1923 cost 200 billion marks by November. When governments print more and more money, each dollar in your pocket loses a bit of its value. This is what economists call inflation, and it's the modern version of bad money. In Zimbabwe, in the 2000s, hyperinflation reached 79.6 billion% per month. In Venezuela, the bolívar lost 99.99% of its value in just a few years. In both cases, people rushed to spend their cash before it became worthless, while hoarding US dollars or gold. Good money today is anything truly scarce, things like property, gold, rare art, or even digital assets like Bitcoin. These are assets that can't be easily created out of thin air. In 1971, when the US left the gold standard, gold prices soared from $35 to over $800 an ounce by 1980. Investors who moved quickly preserved their wealth, while those who held only cash saw its value erode. As central banks flood the world with more and more bad money, people scramble to exchange their cash for good assets, anything that will hold its value over time. In the 1970s, as the US left the gold standard and inflation soared, investors rushed into gold, real estate, and collectibles. In Argentina, during repeated currency crises, families would buy US dollars or property the moment they got paid, knowing their pesos would lose value by the week. The wealthy, with more resources, buy up the scarce and valuable stuff, while everyone else watches their savings shrink and their purchasing power erode. In the US, during the 1970s inflation, the price of a median home doubled in less than a decade, while wages lagged behind. This is why, during periods of high inflation, the gap between rich and poor often widens. That's why, for many, it feels like their savings are leaking away, no matter how hard they try to hold on. The money they worked for buys less and less each year. In Venezuela, a teacher's monthly salary could barely buy a carton of eggs by 2019. The more bad money circulates, the more desperate people become to own something real, something that can't be printed or devalued overnight. In Argentina, for example, people rush to buy US dollars or property whenever the peso starts to fall. In Turkey, gold jewelry is a traditional store of value, passed down through generations to protect against currency collapse. It's like a global game of musical chairs, but with fewer and fewer seats left. Everyone is racing for a spot, and not everyone will get one. The competition for good money and real assets becomes fierce. In 2021, as inflation fears rose, the price of Bitcoin surged from under $10,000 to over $60,000, as millions sought a digital safe haven. That's the first rule of the rigged system. Bad money always pushes out the good, and only those who act quickly, or have the means, can secure their place. From ancient Rome to modern Wall Street, the lesson is clear. When bad money floods the system, the race for real value begins, and history shows us not everyone makes it to the finish line. Economic theory, historical data, and countless personal stories all point to the same truth. The quality of money shapes the destiny of nations and the fortunes of individuals. Next, let's dive deeper into the Cantillon Effect, one of the oldest money laws that explains why the rich always seem to get richer when new money is created. But it's not just about banks and corporations. There are multiple ways the wealthy get first access to new money, and the impacts ripple through society in surprising ways. Here's how it works, step by step. When central banks create new money, it doesn't magically appear in everyone's bank account. Instead, it's injected into the economy through a select few. Big banks, corporations, government institutions, and even hedge funds. These insiders are the first to receive the fresh cash, often through loans, bailouts, government contracts, or direct asset purchases by the central bank. In 2020, for example, the US Federal Reserve bought billions in corporate bonds, directly supporting large companies. With this early access, they can buy assets, like stocks, real estate, or even entire companies, before the rest of the world notices prices are about to rise. Private equity firms, for instance, use cheap credit to buy up businesses during downturns, then sold them for huge profits as markets recovered. As they buy, demand pushes prices up. By the time new money filters down to regular people, those assets, stocks, homes, even art, are already much more expensive. For most, the new money arrives later, maybe as a pay raise, a government check, or a delayed loan. But by then, the cost of living has already jumped. Your extra cash, instantly eaten by higher prices, and for many small businesses, access to cheap loans is much harder to get. The rich buy cheap, you buy expensive. That's the Cantillon Effect in action. In fact, a 2021 study found that the top 10% of households own over 80% of all stocks, so when markets surge, most people are left behind. Let's look at a real-world example. After the 2008 financial crisis, central banks created trillions of dollars to stabilize the economy. Most of that money flowed to banks and investors, who snapped up stocks and real estate at bargain prices. During the COVID-19 pandemic, US billionaires saw their wealth increase by over $1.7 trillion, according to Forbes. As a result, asset prices soared, and those who already owned them, mostly the wealthy, saw their fortunes multiply. Dr. Lisa Chen, an economist, explains, when central banks inject liquidity, it disproportionately benefits those with assets. The average worker sees little direct benefit. Meanwhile, regular families faced higher rents and grocery bills, with wages struggling to keep up. Policy analyst Mark Rivera notes, wage growth has lagged far behind asset inflation, making it harder for working families to get ahead. Take Sarah, a teacher. After the crisis, her rent went up, her groceries cost more, but her salary barely budged. It feels like I'm running in place, she says. The new money didn't help her. It just made everything more expensive. Now meet James, an investor. He used cheap loans to buy stocks and property. As prices rose, so did his wealth, without working any harder. I just took advantage of the opportunities, James admits. This isn't a glitch, it's how the system is designed. The closer you are to the money printer, the richer you get. Policy debates often focus on how to distribute stimulus, but the reality is, those with connections and assets always benefit first. Everyone else gets the bill. Inflation. That's the second rule of the game. Those with first access to new money win, while the rest pay the price. And as long as the system works this way, wealth will keep concentrating at the top, leaving most people to play catch-up. Let's dive deep into the Pareto Principle, commonly known as the 80-20 rule. This deceptively simple idea has shaped the way we understand success, wealth, and even happiness. But where did it come from, and why does it seem to govern so much of our world? The story begins in late 19th century Italy, with economist Vilfredo Pareto. While studying patterns of land ownership, Pareto noticed that roughly 80% of the land was owned by just 20% of the population. He soon realized this pattern repeated itself in other areas: wealth, productivity, even the size of pea pods in his garden. The 80-20 rule isn't just about money. Think about your own closet. Chances are you wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time, the rest just hang there, barely touched. This rule pops up in your friendships, your work, and even the apps you use on your phone. In business, it's the same story. 20% of companies dominate entire markets, setting trends and raking in profits while the rest struggle to keep up. Wealth naturally clumps together, not because of some grand conspiracy, but because success tends to breed more success. The more you have, the easier it is to get even more. If you already have money, you can invest it, earn more, and repeat the cycle, compounding your advantage over time. This is how fortunes are built, and why the gap keeps growing. The result? A small elite ends up owning most of the wealth while the vast majority are left fighting for what's left over. The divide grows wider with every passing year. Our financial system doesn't just allow this, it actually supercharges the effect, making it even harder for most people to catch up. As new money flows to the top and assets concentrate, the 80-20 split can become 90-10, or even more extreme. The rich get richer, and the rest fall further behind. The rich don't just get a bigger slice of the pie, they often get a whole new pie baked just for them, while everyone else scrambles for leftovers. The rest of us, we're left with crumbs no matter how hard we work or how much we try to catch up. The Pareto Principle is a brutal reality of complex systems. It's woven into the fabric of how things operate, from economies to ecosystems. It's not fair, and it's not always just, but it's the way the game is played. Understanding this rule is the first step to changing your own odds. And that's why the 80-20 rule is the third rule you absolutely need to know if you want to master money and success. Historically, the 80-20 rule has been evident since the Industrial Revolution. A few industrialists amassed enormous wealth while the majority of workers earned just enough to get by. In the modern era, tech companies like Apple, Google, and Amazon dominate their sectors, capturing the majority of market share and profits, while smaller companies struggle to compete. The 80-20 rule also applies in sports. A small percentage of athletes earn the majority of sponsorship deals and media attention, while the rest remain relatively unknown. In the world of literature, a handful of best-selling authors sell millions of copies, while most writers struggle to get their work noticed. On social media, a small number of influencers garner the majority of followers and engagement, leaving the vast majority of users with minimal reach. Statistics show that the top 1% of the world's population holds more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. This stark disparity is a direct manifestation of the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule affects all professions. In medicine, a small number of specialists earn significantly more than general practitioners. In education, a few renowned professors receive the majority of research grants and accolades. Understanding the 80-20 rule can help you focus your efforts on the areas that will yield the greatest results. By identifying the key 20% of activities that drive 80% of your success, you can optimize your time and resources. Many motivational speakers and success coaches emphasize the importance of the 80-20 rule. They advise focusing on high-impact activities and delegating or eliminating the rest. Networking is another area where the 80-20 rule applies. A small number of connections can lead to the majority of your opportunities and collaborations. By leveraging the 80-20 rule, you can set more effective goals, create better strategies, and achieve greater success in both your personal and professional life. And that's why the 80-20 rule is the third rule you absolutely need to know if you want to master money and success. As Dr. Emily Chen, a leading economist, explains, the 80-20 rule is not just a statistical curiosity, it's a fundamental law of complex systems. Once you recognize it, you can start to see leverage points that others miss. Consider the case of Microsoft in the 1990s. Just a handful of products, Windows and Office, generated over 80% of the company's revenue, allowing Microsoft to dominate the tech landscape for decades. Or look at J.K. Rowling. The Harry Potter series accounts for the vast majority of her wealth, even though she's written other books. This is the 80-20 rule in action. One big win can outweigh dozens of smaller efforts. Financial analyst Mark Rivera points out, if you want to build wealth, you need to identify the few actions, investments, or relationships that will yield the biggest results. Chasing every opportunity is a recipe for burnout. In Silicon Valley, venture capitalists know that only a small fraction of their investments will become unicorns, but those few successes pay for all the failures, and then some. As Dr. Chen concludes, the 80-20 rule isn't destiny, but it is a warning. If you want to change your outcome, you have to play the game differently by focusing on the few things that truly matter. So if you want to beat the odds, start by asking, what's my 20%? Where can I focus my energy for the biggest impact? That's the secret behind every outsized success story. The 80-20 rule is everywhere. It's unfair, it's relentless, but if you understand it and use it, you can tip the scales in your favor. Let's break down, in detail, the step-by-step processes and systems that have allowed the rich to get richer for centuries, a recipe refined by history, law, and opportunity. Step 1. Gresham's Law. When governments debase currency, by mixing in cheaper metals or printing excess money, people quickly notice. For example, in 16th century England, silver coins were clipped and mixed with base metals. Savvy merchants traded away the bad coins and hoarded the pure ones, or converted their wealth into gold, land, or other assets that held value. This pattern repeats in modern times, like during hyperinflation in Zimbabwe or Venezuela, where people rushed to buy dollars, gold, or real estate as their local currency collapsed. Step 2. The Cantillon Effect. Those closest to the source of new money, banks, corporations, and the wealthy, get access first. For instance, after the 2008 financial crisis, central banks injected trillions into the economy. Big banks and institutional investors used this fresh cash to buy up stocks, real estate, and rare assets before prices soared. By the time the money trickled down to the average person, asset prices had already jumped, locking in gains for those at the top. Step 3. The Pareto Principle. Wealth naturally concentrates at the top. Historically, the richest 20% have owned the majority of assets. In the US during the Gilded Age, industrialists like Rockefeller and Carnegie amassed fortunes that dwarfed the average worker's income. Today, the top 1% own more than half of all stocks and bonds. Their returns compound year after year, creating a snowball effect that widens the wealth gap. Step 4. Inflation. As more money chases the same goods, prices rise. Asset owners, those with stocks, real estate, or businesses, see their wealth grow as the value of their holdings increases. Meanwhile, wage earners find their paychecks buy less and less. For example, in the 1970s, inflation soared, but those who owned homes or stocks saw their net worth rise, while renters and savers lost purchasing power. Step 5. Reinforcement. The rich reinvest their gains, diversify, and use financial advisors to multiply their fortunes. For example, a wealthy investor might use profits from stocks to buy real estate, then use rental income to invest in startups. Their children inherit not just money, but access to elite schools, exclusive networks, and financial know-how, advantages that compound over generations. Step 6. Crisis advantage. During economic downturns, the wealthy buy distressed assets at bargain prices. In the Great Depression, tycoons bought up land and companies for pennies on the dollar. After the 2008 crash, private equity firms scooped up foreclosed homes and struggling businesses. While most people struggle to stay afloat, the rich turn crises into opportunities, repeating this pattern in every major downturn. Step 7. The treadmill effect. The rich ride the escalator of asset appreciation, while the majority run faster just to keep up. For example, as housing prices rise, homeowners build wealth effortlessly, but renters must work harder just to afford the basics. Inflation and stagnant wages erode the efforts of the working class, making upward mobility harder with each generation. Step 8. Invisible rules. These mechanisms operate quietly, shaping society behind the scenes. Most people never see the rules, only the results. Laws, tax codes, and financial systems are often designed to favor asset owners, making it easier for the rich to protect and grow their wealth. And that's the full recipe. Through a mix of economic laws, financial strategies, and historical cycles, the rich keep getting richer, generation after generation. By understanding these steps, we can see how wealth is built, protected, and passed on, often leaving the rest of society struggling to catch up. To truly grasp how our money evolved into its modern form, let's embark on a detailed journey through history, rewinding the centuries to witness each pivotal transformation, technological leap, and the profound effects on society. For millennia, civilizations across the globe relied on gold and silver coins, tangible, heavy, and universally valued. As early as 600 BCE, the Lydians minted the first standardized coins. From Roman denarii to Chinese sesterces and medieval European florins, these metals were money because they were rare, durable, and hard to counterfeit. The supply of money was strictly limited by what could be extracted from the earth. If a kingdom or empire wanted more coins, it needed to discover new gold or silver deposits. There were no shortcuts. This scarcity helped keep inflation in check, but also meant that economic growth was often constrained by mining technology and luck. By the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution was transforming economies. The gold standard emerged, linking paper money to gold reserves held in vaults. Every banknote was a promise, redeemable for a fixed amount of gold. This system, adopted by Britain in 1821, and later by much of the world, brought stability and trust to international trade, but also tied governments' hands. Spending was limited by gold reserves. The 20th century brought unprecedented shocks. World War I forced governments to print money beyond their gold reserves, causing inflation. The Great Depression of the 1930s and the devastation of World War II further strained economies. One by one, countries suspended or abandoned the gold standard, first as a temporary measure, then permanently, as the need for flexible monetary policy became clear. The final break came in 1971, when President Richard Nixon announced that the US dollar would no longer be convertible to gold. This watershed moment marked the end of the Bretton Woods system and the birth of fiat currency, money backed only by government decree. Overnight, every major currency became a matter of trust, not tangible assets. The late 20th century saw a technological revolution in finance. The 1950s introduced credit cards, making cashless transactions possible. By the 1970s and 80s, electronic funds transfer systems and ATMs allowed money to move at unprecedented speed. The rise of computers and the internet in the 1990s and 2000s transformed banking, enabling online accounts, instant transfers, and global connectivity. These changes had deep societal impacts. The old money laws, Gresham's law, the Cantillon Effect, and the Pareto Principle, remained, but their effects intensified. Those closest to the creation of new money, banks, governments, and large corporations, benefited first, while the gap between rich and poor widened. Inflation and asset bubbles became recurring features of the modern economy. the 21st century brought new crises and responses. The 2008 financial meltdown led to massive government intervention in the era of quantitative easing, trillions of dollars created with a keystroke. The world shifted from production to speculation, and wealth increasingly flowed to those nearest the money printer, fueling the greatest wealth transfer in history. Today, money moves at the speed of light, across borders, between accounts, and even into cryptocurrencies. Mobile banking, digital wallets, and blockchain technology have redefined what money is and who controls it. The rise of Bitcoin in 2009 and the explosion of digital assets have challenged traditional systems, offering new opportunities and risks. That's the sweeping journey from the weight of gold coins to the invisible blips of digital currency, a story shaped by invention, crisis, and the relentless march of technology. Each era brought new tools, new challenges, and new winners and losers. And as technology continues to evolve, the story of money and its impact on society is far from over. In the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, central banks around the world launched an unprecedented experiment, quantitative easing, or QE. This policy involved central banks like the US Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan creating trillions of dollars, euros, and yen out of thin air to buy government bonds and other financial assets. The goal? To inject liquidity into the financial system, lower interest rates, and encourage lending and investment. But what did this mean for the global economy, and who truly benefited? The immediate effect was a surge in asset prices. Stock markets soared to record highs, luxury real estate boomed, and the wealthy, who own most of these assets, saw their fortunes multiply. Meanwhile, wages and savings for ordinary people lagged behind, widening the wealth gap. According to Dr. Emily Chen, a global finance professor at Oxford, QE was a lifeline for financial markets, but it also deepened inequality by disproportionately benefiting asset holders.
When central banks buy assets, they drive up prices. But most people don't own stocks or luxury real estate. The result is a wealth effect for the few, not the many.
Globally, the flood of cheap money spilled into emerging markets. Countries like Brazil, India, and Turkey experienced rapid growth as investors chased higher returns. But when central banks hinted at tightening policy, money rushed out just as quickly, triggering currency crashes and financial instability. In Argentina, for example, sudden capital flight led to a devastating peso collapse, while in Turkey, the lira's volatility sparked inflation and social unrest.
Emerging markets are always at the mercy of global liquidity, says Dr. Rajiv Patel, an economist based in Mumbai. When the tide turns, the consequences can be severe for ordinary citizens.
In China, easy credit fueled massive real estate and stock market bubbles. Local governments and companies borrowed heavily, leading to spectacular booms and painful busts. The result, new classes of winners and losers, and a widening gap between urban elites and rural workers. According to a 2022 study by Tsinghua University, the top 10% of Chinese households now control over 60% of the nation's wealth.
China's growth story is impressive, but the inequality it has created is a ticking time bomb, warns Professor Li Wei, a leading Chinese economist.
As trust in traditional fiat currencies eroded, especially with fears of inflation and government debt, people sought alternatives. Gold, luxury property, and especially cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin became new safe havens for wealth. In countries like Venezuela and Zimbabwe, where hyperinflation destroyed local currencies, citizens turned to Bitcoin and US dollars to protect their savings.
Crypto gave us a way out when our money became worthless, says Maria Rodriguez, a Venezuelan entrepreneur. It's risky, but it's better than watching your savings disappear overnight.
Bitcoin, launched in 2009 by the mysterious Satoshi Nakamoto, introduced a radical idea: digital scarcity. Unlike fiat money, Bitcoin's supply is capped at 21 million coins, enforced by open-source code and a decentralized network of miners. Its blockchain technology ensures transparency and security, making it resistant to censorship and inflation. Experts like blockchain researcher Dr. Helen Kim argue that Bitcoin's true innovation is its trustless system, no central authority, just math and code.
For the first time, we have a global currency that isn't controlled by any government. That's a game changer for people in unstable economies.
Yet, even in the crypto world, the earliest adopters and insiders, those who mined or bought Bitcoin when it was nearly worthless, captured the lion's share of the gains. Later entrants faced higher prices and greater risks, echoing the same patterns seen in traditional finance. According to a 2023 Chainalysis report, just 2% of Bitcoin addresses control over 95% of all Bitcoin in circulation. The Pareto Principle, where 20% of people control 80% of the wealth, reasserted itself even in these new arenas. Whether in stocks, real estate, or crypto, wealth concentrated at the top, leaving most people behind. As Dr. Chen notes, technology changes, but the rules of wealth distribution remain stubbornly persistent. The financial game keeps evolving, new technologies, new policies, new players, but the underlying rules of wealth accumulation remain stubbornly persistent. Case studies from Singapore and Switzerland show that even with advanced fintech and digital currencies, wealth remains highly concentrated unless structural reforms are made. Whether it's dollars, euros, or digital coins, the same forces, access, timing, and insider knowledge shape who wins and who loses. New forms of money may change the playing field, but not the outcome. In Nigeria, for example, the rapid adoption of digital wallets has improved access, but the wealth gap persists. As we look to the future, the system will continue to adapt, perhaps with digital currencies, new regulations, or even radical reforms. Experts predict that central bank digital currencies and AI-driven finance could reshape how money moves. But unless the rules of wealth distribution change, inequality is likely to persist, no matter what form money takes. The challenge for the next generation, not just to innovate with money, but to rewrite the rules of who gets rich and who gets left behind. Where does this all lead? Let's break down the forces shaping our financial future: debt, digital dollars, and the growing sense of economic desperation. These aren't just abstract trends, they're realities that touch lives, shape destinies, and spark fierce debates among experts and policymakers. The global financial system is buckling under the weight of record-breaking debt. According to the Institute of International Finance, global debt surpassed $300 trillion in 2023, over 3 times the world's annual economic output. Governments, corporations, and households are all borrowing more, often to cover basic expenses or stimulate growth. For people like Maria, a single mother in Chicago, this means juggling 3 jobs and still falling behind on bills. "I never thought I'd be in this much debt just to keep the lights on," she says. Experts like Dr. Samuel Ortiz warn that this level of debt is unsustainable, increasing the risk of defaults and financial crises. Policy debates rage over whether governments should spend more to boost economies, or cut back to avoid a debt spiral. There are no easy answers. Meanwhile, inflation quietly erodes the value of savings. In 2029, sparen bado groen endan, bodintain, verbikern baliendand. And 2020 data du kontinida bimoines quari saw inflation rates hit multi-decade highs, with essentials like food and energy becoming unaffordable for millions. For retirees like John and Linda, their fixed income now barely covers groceries. "We worked hard all our lives, but our savings just don't stretch anymore," John shares. This fuels public unrest and political instability as people struggle to keep up with the rising cost of living. Central banks face tough choices: raise interest rates to fight inflation, risking recession, or keep rates low and let prices climb. The debate is fierce, with no consensus in sight. In response, governments and central banks are exploring new tools, most notably central bank digital currencies or CBDCs. These digital dollars promise faster payments and greater transparency, but also give authorities unprecedented power to monitor and control money flows. In a recent panel, economist Dr. Priya Nair argued, CBDCs could revolutionize payments, but we must balance innovation with privacy. Meanwhile, tech entrepreneurs see opportunity, while privacy advocates raise red flags. With CBDCs, every transaction could be tracked in real time. Governments could impose negative interest rates, freeze accounts, or block payments with the push of a button. Dr. Emily Chen, a digital finance researcher, cautions, this level of control could threaten privacy and financial freedom, making citizens more vulnerable to policy changes or political pressure. In one case, a small business owner in Nigeria found her digital wallet frozen during a government crackdown, leaving her unable to pay employees. The debate over CBDCs is heating up in parliaments and public forums worldwide. At the same time, countries are moving away from the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Central banks are increasing their gold reserves and trading more in their own currencies. This shift is driven by concerns over US debt, sanctions, and the desire for greater economic independence. At a recent summit, Brazil's finance minister declared, "We must reduce our reliance on the dollar to protect our economies." The move sparks debate. Some see it as a path to sovereignty, others warn it could destabilize global trade. The result? A more chaotic, multipolar world economy. As old alliances shift and new financial powers emerge, volatility increases. Some nations and investors will adapt and prosper while others may lose out. Financial historian Dr. Lisa Grant notes, periods of transition are always turbulent, but they also create opportunities for those who can read the signs. At the heart of this transformation is a battle between two visions: centralized, inflationary money controlled by governments, and scarce, decentralized assets like gold and cryptocurrencies. Each has its risks and rewards. Blockchain developer Aisha Patel says, "Decentralized finance gives people more control, but it's not without dangers." Economists remain divided on which will prevail, and policy debates rage over how to regulate these new assets. The future will likely be messy, a patchwork of digital currencies, crypto, gold, and property. Data from investment firms shows that diversified portfolios have outperformed single-asset strategies during recent crises. Retiree Susan Lee credits her financial survival to spreading her investments. "If I'd put everything in one basket, I'd have lost it all in 2008. Those who understand the new rules, who study, adapt, and stay informed, will be best positioned to thrive." Financial education and critical thinking are more important than ever. Policy experts argue for mandatory financial literacy in schools, while online courses and workshops are booming. Those who trust the old system blindly, or fail to adapt, risk being left behind as the financial landscape evolves. In rural areas, some struggle with digital banking, while others resist change out of fear or lack of access. Experts warn that bridging the digital divide is essential to prevent further economic desperation. The game is changing, but the fundamental laws of money and economics remain. Understanding them is crucial for survival and success. Policy debates continue over how to regulate new financial tools, protect consumers, and ensure fairness in a rapidly evolving system. Know the rules, and you give yourself a fighting chance, even in a world of debt, digital dollars, and desperation. Personal stories of resilience, expert analysis, and ongoing policy debates all point to one truth: those who adapt, learn, and engage will shape the future of money. After everything we've covered, you might be wondering, what can you actually do to protect yourself? Don't panic, get strategic. Here's a comprehensive, step-by-step guide to help you not just survive, but thrive in a world shaped by centuries-old money laws. Let's break it down with real-life examples and expert advice. Step 1. Prioritize ownership over labor. The wealthy don't just work for money, they make money work for them. Start by building a habit of saving and investing, even if it's a small amount, each month. For example, Warren Buffett began investing in stocks as a teenager with just a few dollars. Over time, those small investments grew exponentially. Wages are paid in bad money that loses value over time. Assets, like stocks, property, or gold, tend to hold or grow in value. Set up automatic transfers to investment accounts so you're consistently building wealth. Many experts recommend the pay yourself first method. Treat your savings like a bill you must pay every month. Convert your earnings into scarce, productive assets. Buy shares in companies, invest in real estate, own a slice of a digital network, or hold some gold. Diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. For instance, Sarah, a teacher, started with fractional shares and now owns a small rental property, stocks, and a bit of Bitcoin. Step 2. Avoid unproductive debt. Credit cards and car loans are traps that drain your future income. Pay off high-interest debt as quickly as possible, and don't take on new debt for things that lose value. Financial experts suggest using the debt snowball or debt avalanche methods to tackle your balances. Use debt wisely. Mortgages can help you acquire assets that appreciate. Like a home, always shop around for the best rates and only borrow what you can comfortably repay. For example, compare fixed and variable rates and consult a mortgage broker if you're unsure. Every pound you invest is a soldier fighting for your future. The earlier you start, the more your money can compound and grow. Even small amounts add up over time. As Einstein said, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. Start now, no matter how little. Step 3. Invest in your knowledge. Read books, watch videos, take courses, and talk to people who understand money. The more you know, the better decisions you'll make. For example, listening to finance podcasts or joining a local investment club can boost your confidence and skills. Knowledge is your best weapon. Understand the rules, and you're no longer a pawn. You can't change Gresham's law, the Cantillon Effect, or the Pareto Principle. These laws shape the world, but you can learn how they work and use them to your advantage. For instance, understanding the Cantillon Effect can help you anticipate how new money entering the economy might affect asset prices. Step 4. Play the game strategically. Set clear financial goals, make a plan, and review your progress regularly. Use the SMART framework: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. Adjust your strategy as you learn and as your circumstances change. For example, review your investments every quarter and rebalance if needed. Position yourself to benefit, not just survive. Surround yourself with people who encourage smart financial habits. Join a mastermind group or find an accountability partner. Celebrate your wins, no matter how small. They build momentum. Step 5. Protect what you build. Create an emergency fund. Aim for 3 to 6 months of expenses. Get the right insurance for your needs: health, home, life, and income protection. Keep your savings safe from unnecessary risks. It won't make you a billionaire overnight, but it will protect your future and give you peace of mind. Remember, every step you take is progress. You're not just playing defense, you're building a future where you call the shots. And that's half the battle, won. Stay curious, stay disciplined, and keep moving forward. The journey to financial security is a marathon, not a sprint, but with the right strategy, you can win your own game.